Hi guys, making progress through the season, and we've just completed the letter X in our journey through the arcade game alphabet. We've had X multiply for the past 2 weeks, and following wiping, anything was going to be better. We've also had a lot of Golden Age games, so have a slightly later shmub has been refreshing. X multiply is from Irem, the makers of R-Type, and it certainly has a similar feel, with your force pod being replaced by a pair of flappy tentacles. Personally, I find these more annoying than the force pod, but overall it's still a pretty fun game. The biological feel of everything is nice, and the controls are pretty tight. Like R-Type, it's one you need to memorise, and after multiple goes, you begin to learn the patterns. Interestingly, it did eventually come home, 9 years after its release, appearing on the PlayStation and the Saturn. The graphics certainly would have been a bit much for the 16-bit systems at the time, apart from maybe the X68000 or FM Towns. So a game I certainly enjoyed, although didn't manage to find time for a second stab after a good first session. So let's take a look at the scores. I've had 14 scores submitted, including a return from Dan AF90, although he's going by Joss AF90 now. I've also had a first score from Gradius 57300, a pal from Instagram, who likes a shmup and wanted an excuse to fire up the Mystical. Paul is just shy of 500,000 in 10th, then Milthy and Retro Arcade Challenge are in the 500,000s, and My Retro Tech and Wee Bob in the 600,000s. I'm in 5th on 740,000, and then Big Juffer has made a return after a short hiatus in 4th with 875,000. Our top 3 all scored over a million, which is a great effort. Blue Yak is in 3rd with 1.03 million, Gradius 57,300 is in 2nd with 1.05 million, but winning for the first time this season is Graham 10 Shearers with 1.35 million. Great score from Graham, and being 300,000 ahead of everyone is an excellent effort. Here is the score distribution, and there's a bit of a spread. There are a few bins with multiple folks in them, through to Graham at the top. He's on his own, showing he was the class of the field, but this wasn't a hugely dominant performance, like we've sometimes seen. Now the difficulty curve. This game has a fairly linear scoring system, and other than our bottom 3 finishing on very similar scores, beyond that, things increase pretty linearly, all the way up to Graham at the top. There are 3 small plateaus, which may be dying around some of the challenging sections, such as some of the bosses, but generally things increase quite smoothly. This likely shows the more time you put into it, then the better the returns are as you learn the game, rather than there being particularly tough sections, with many people getting stuck there. And finally the progress over the 2 weeks. Something quite notable here is the number of horizontal lines. This indicates that many people had a session with the game and then didn't return. This was certainly the case for me, as I didn't fancy relearning the game after the gap away. Bob and Blue Yak both had a few stabs at it, so I'm guessing they were enjoying it. We can see Graham dropped his score around the midway point, and he wasn't to be caught. Before we see our next game, here's the leaderboard. We have 2 people making up 2 places. Gradius 57,300 won't make the table as there are only 3 games left, so I've adjusted the scores accordingly. Juffer therefore takes 3rd and has got ahead of both Robert and Paul, and Bob has got ahead of Milthy and Retro Arcade Challenge. Further up the table, the battle for the lower podium places is very much on. There is only 9 points between Colin in 2nd and Blue Yak in 4th, with My Retro Tech in the middle. Very much all to play for there. At the top though, Graham is nearly 200 points ahead of Colin in 2nd, so the season win is all but wrapped up. Back-to-back wins in the last 2 games has very much secured his position. Let's see if that trend can be reversed with our next game. Next up is a game beginning with the letter Y, and there's possibly the slimmest pickings of any letter. We only have 2 selections, which are Yia Kung Fu with 3 votes, and Youjyuden with 4. Graham chose Youjyuden, so that's trebled. That gives it a 66% probability of appearing. So let's set things going and see what we get. Okay, here it goes. Okay, pretty easy one here. It's going to be Youjyuden. So from what I vaguely remember, this is kind of a top-down sort of run-and-gun type game. It was on the Mister, which is nice. So I'll go make a video and be back in a sec. So our game for the letter Y is Youjyuden. released by Irem in 1986. It got a US release as Heroic Episode and looks like it was recently ported to modern consoles. It follows a similar game mechanic to Capcom's Commando, which was released the year before and no doubt provided some inspiration. It feels a little slower paced than Commando, but seems reasonable, and I certainly enjoy this style of running gun. You have a multi-directional shot and a vertical one, which I think is a decent combo. We'll be using the Japan ROM and default settings. For our next game, please send me one beginning with the letter Z. Not crazy amounts here, but better than the letter Y. Zaxxon, Zero Wing, or Zoopapa all catch my attention looking at what's out there, and we've already had Zookeeper all the way back in Season 1. So I hope you'll enjoy playing a bit of Youjyuden, and I'll be back in a couple of weeks. See you then.